I never liked speaking in front of crowds, and my parents knew that better than anyone. So when they approached me an hour before the ceremony, faces unusually tense, I knew something was wrong the moment my mother closed the dressing room door behind her. My father paced once, twice, then turned to me abruptly. "You're giving your speech to your brother instead," he said. No explanation, no warmth, no room for discussion. I stared at him, thinking it was some kind of late joke, but his jaw was set, his eyes cold in a way I had never seen before. My brother, Ethan, lounged against the wall behind them, arms crossed, pretending disinterest, but watching me with a flicker of something. Anxiety or guilt? I couldn't tell. "Why?" I managed to ask. My mother forced a tight smile, the kind she used on neighbors to hide a disaster behind closed doors. "It's better this way," she said. "Safer for everyone. Just hand him the speech and sit quietly. Don't argue, please." Safer? The word dug into me like a hook. "What's going on?" I asked, looking from her to my brother, but neither answered. Ethan glanced at my parents, then at me, his expression shifting for a split second. Fear, unmistakable fear, but then he straightened, pretending confidence. "Come on," he murmured, reaching out. "Just give it up. It's not a big deal." Not a big deal? I'd spent months preparing this speech. Teachers had reviewed it, the board had approved it, and I'd practiced it so many times that I could recite every word backward. I'd earned the honor, and now, without explanation, they wanted me silent. My father stepped forward, taking the notebook from my hands with a grip that bordered on forceful. "This isn't about pride," he said quietly. "Just do as we say." Then he added something that chilled me to the bone. "Please don't make this difficult." My parents never said please. I tried to reach for the notebook, but he pulled it back, slipping it into Ethan's hands. Ethan swallowed hard, avoiding my eyes. "I'll read it exactly," he said, which was the first sign something was wrong. Ethan never agreed to anything exactly. He always twisted, embellished, made things about himself. Hearing him promise obedience felt unnatural, rehearsed. The ceremony started 20 minutes later. Hundreds of parents filled the hall, the principal welcomed everyone, and my classmates shifted anxiously in their chairs. I sat between two people I barely knew, my hands cold, my mind spinning. Why did my family look like they were preparing for disaster? Why did Ethan look like he wanted to run? And why, this was the strangest part, did the board's chairwoman keep glancing nervously at the side doors, as though waiting for someone to enter? When Ethan's name was announced instead of mine, the crowd applauded politely, but I caught confusion on some of the teachers' faces. They looked at each other, at me, at the podium. Something wasn't adding up. Ethan walked onto the stage with the notebook trembling in his hand. My parents sat straight-backed in the front row, my mother clutching her purse as though bracing for impact. My father's eyes locked on my brother with laser precision. The air inside the hall felt thick, electric. Wrong. Ethan opened the notebook and stared at the first page. He didn't speak. 10 seconds, 20, a full minute. The audience rustled, confused. My father leaned forward, whispering something urgently, his voice low but desperate. Ethan shook his head once, sharply. Then he lifted his eyes and looked straight at me, not at the crowd, not at the board. Me. In that moment, I understood something. He couldn't read the speech. Not that he wasn't allowed, not that he was nervous. He couldn't, because whatever was written there, whatever my parents had taken from me, was not my speech anymore. Someone had changed it. My parents knew, Ethan knew, and suddenly I realized I was the only one in that room who didn't. Ethan exhaled, trembling from head to toe, and closed the notebook. "I can't do this," he said, voice cracking. Gasps rippled through the hall. My father half stood, eyes wide with something between fury and terror. My mother grabbed his arm, whispering frantically. My heart hammered in my chest. Something was going to happen, something big. Ethan stepped away from the microphone. I rose from my seat, the entire hall watching me as I walked toward the stage. Ethan looked relieved, no, grateful when I reached him. He shoved the notebook into my hands like it was burning him, and then, in a voice nobody else could hear, he whispered, "I'm sorry." My pulse spiked. I opened the notebook. My handwriting was gone, replaced with a single typed page. 6 sentences. I read the first one, and the floor seemed to tilt under my feet. It wasn't a speech. It was a confession. A confession about something my parents had done, something that should have never seen the light of day, something that involved Ethan, something that involved me. I looked up. My parents were frozen, their faces drained of color. My father shook his head slowly, pleading silently with his eyes. My mother whispered, "Please don't." But I stepped to the microphone, my hands steady, my breathing calm. For the first time in my life, silence in front of a crowd didn't scare me, because the truth was bigger than fear. The audience waited, hundreds watching, my parents trembling, Ethan unable to breathe, and I said one sentence, just one, and it froze the entire hall. "My brother wasn't supposed to survive." That was the sentence. The one that sliced through the hall like a blade. The one that made hundreds of people forget how to breathe. The microphone carried it across the room with cruel clarity. A few people frowned in confusion. Some gasped. Others exchanged startled looks. But my parents, their reaction was different. My mother's face crumpled as though someone had reached inside her and shattered something vital. My father stood abruptly, knocking his chair back, eyes burning with a terror I'd never seen. "Stop!" he shouted, voice cracking, pushing past people in the row. "Stop now!" But it was too late. The truth was already echoing through the hall. Ethan's legs buckled. He grabbed the edge of the podium to stay standing. His breaths came too fast, too sharp, like he was reliving something he'd spent years trying to forget. I gripped the microphone, the typed page trembling in my hands. I wanted to stop. I wanted to run. But something inside me, something buried for years, was waking up, something hungry for truth. "When Ethan was 8, I said, my voice strangely steady, "our parents took him somewhere, a place they never told anyone about." "Enough!" my father roared, but 2 teachers stepped in front of him, not understanding the situation but sensing danger. My mother pressed her hands over her mouth, tears streaking down her face. I looked at Ethan. He was shaking violently, shaking so hard I feared he would collapse. But he nodded. It was small, barely noticeable, but it was permission. It was relief. He wanted it out. "They told everyone he was sick," I continued. "They told everyone he needed a special treatment." A murmur rippled through the audience. The board members exchanged uneasy glances. The principal's face had gone pale. "But the truth," I said, lifting the page for everyone to see, "is that he wasn't sick at all. He was—" The lights flickered. The hall went completely silent. Not from my words, from something else, from the entrance door opening. A man stepped inside. He wore a dark gray suit, perfectly pressed, expression calm in a way that didn't match the tension in the room. His eyes scanned the hall until they landed on me, and something like irritation flickered across his face, gone so fast I almost doubted it. My father froze when he saw him. The blood drained from his skin. My mother let out a tiny, broken sound. Ethan's breathing turned ragged. The man walked down the aisle unhurriedly, as though he had all the time in the world, as though he owned the space between every heartbeat in the room. "You shouldn't be reading that," he said, voice smooth as polished steel. My fingers tightened around the microphone. "Who are you?" I asked. The man smiled. "Someone your parents should have warned you about." He climbed onto the stage with a fluid grace, ignoring the teachers shouting for him to stop. When he reached me, he extended his hand, not to touch me, but to the notebook. "Give it to me," he said softly. "It's not yours to share." Ethan made a choked sound behind me. "Don't," he whispered. "Don't give it to him." My heart pounded. "What did they do to him?" I demanded. "What happened when he was 8? The man's smile widened, but there was no warmth in it, only calculation. "Not here, not in front of all these people. Let's keep the past where it belongs." He reached again for the notebook. I stepped back.
"Tell them," I said, loudly, the microphone making my voice boom through the hall. "Tell everyone what happened in that facility." A ripple of panic passed across the man's face, subtle but real. He didn't like being named in public. He didn't like witnesses. He lowered his voice. "Your parents signed an agreement, a binding one. You're not part of it. You don't understand the consequences." "I understand enough," I said. "You experimented on my brother." Gasps. A woman fainted. Someone shouted for security. The man's smile disappeared entirely. His voice dropped to a whisper, sharp as a blade. "Give me the notebook." Ethan suddenly shoved past me and stepped between us. Something I'd never seen in him before, courage, raw and shaking, flashed in his eyes. "No, you don't get to control us anymore." The man's jaw tightened. "Ethan, don't make me remind you what they'll do if this gets out." Ethan's breath hitched, but he didn't move, not an inch. For the first time in years, he stood tall, defiant, alive. My father tried to rush the stage again, shouting something incoherent, but people held him back. My mother whispered prayers under her breath. The man reached into his jacket. I didn't know if he was pulling out a document, an ID badge, or something worse. I didn't wait to find out. I raised the microphone again. "They used my brother for neurological testing. He wasn't sick. They made him sick." The man lunged. The lights exploded into red emergency glow. People screamed. Ethan grabbed my hand and pulled me off the stage as security finally rushed in, and the man's voice echoed through the chaos, cold, furious, promising something I didn't yet understand. "You don't know what you've started." Ethan and I ran, and the secret our parents spent a decade burying came alive behind us, like something with teeth.
But the silence didn't last long. My mother screamed first. It wasn't just a startled scream. It was the kind of sound something makes when it breaks from the inside. She lunged toward me, grabbing my wrist so sharply I almost dropped the microphone. "Stop it! Stop right now!" she hissed, as if whispering could somehow erase the fact that hundreds of people were already listening to every word I said. My father stepped toward me from the other side, his face paler than chalk. "You don't understand what you're doing," he said, his voice trembling, even though he was desperately trying to keep it controlled. But I saw it. Fear was eating through them like acid. And for the first time in my life, I understood. This wasn't fear for me. This was fear of what they knew and what I didn't. My brother stood just behind them. He still held the page, the speech they had written for him, the one they demanded I hand over. His hands were shaking, not slightly, violently. His eyes kept darting between our parents and me, like he was silently begging someone to stop what was coming. "Please," he mouthed, not daring to speak out loud, but it was impossible to tell whether he wanted to protect me from them or them from me. The crowd murmured now, louder, confused, shifting in their seats. Teachers whispered to each other. Someone began recording, and I realized that the moment I opened my mouth again, something irreversible would happen. My mother tightened her grip on my wrist until her nails dug into my skin. "If you say another word," she whispered, "everything we built will fall apart." I looked at her. Really looked, and suddenly I understood one thing clearly. Nothing she had ever built had been for me. My brother took one small step forward. "Don't," he whispered, his voice thin, shaking. But behind his fear, there was something else, something that looked a lot like guilt, the type that grows roots, the type that doesn't let you sleep. And it hit me. My parents weren't the only ones hiding something. He was too. I said his name quietly. He flinched. My mother tried to pull me away from the microphone. My father reached for the cable to yank it from the podium, but I moved faster. I leaned forward, spoke into the mic, and watched the entire hall freeze as my voice echoed through the speakers. "I'm not giving my speech to my brother," I said, "because he already stole something from me." Gasps rippled through the audience. My parents froze mid-movement. My brother went dead still. And that was only the beginning. My brother's face collapsed in on itself the moment the words left my mouth, like he'd been struck across the chest. He didn't even try to hide it. His eyes widened, his lips parted, and for a moment he forgot to breathe. The hall felt suddenly smaller, tighter, as if the walls themselves leaned in to listen. My father froze with his hand still gripping the mic cable, and my mother was suspended in a half-step, half-plea expression, as if her entire body had been caught between running toward me and running away from the truth. What are you talking about? My mother finally managed, but her voice was thin, fragile, like tissue paper stretched too tight. I turned to my brother, not taking my eyes off him. Tell them, I said softly. Tell everyone what you took. He shook his head frantically, his trembling getting worse. His face was drenched in panic. Stop, he whispered. Please, you don't understand. Then explain it, I said, or I will. A wave of uneasy murmurs swept through the hall. People leaned forward, phones rose higher. A teacher tried to walk toward the stage, but another staff member blocked him, whispering something urgently. It was too late. No one was stopping anything now. My brother swallowed hard, but he couldn't force out a word. He looked at our parents, begging with his eyes. My father stepped in front of him, blocking him from the crowd's view, like a shield. Enough of this, he said, his voice strained. We'll discuss this at home. No, I answered, and the sound of that single word echoed through the auditorium with the clarity of a verdict. We're discussing it here, now, since you wanted him to speak tonight instead of me. My mother's face twisted, because it was important for the family. For the family? I repeated, letting the bitterness coat the words. Everything's always been for the family. Every decision you made, every rule, every punishment, every comparison, every spotlight you forced onto him, and every shadow you forced onto me. My mother's lips parted, but she hesitated too long. That hesitation was everything. You know what he did. You both know, and you covered it, for him, against me. My father's jaw clenched. My mother closed her eyes, as if bracing for a storm, but the one who broke first was my brother. I didn't mean for it to happen, he choked out. The hall went dead silent again. My heart hammered in my chest, but I didn't look away. Say it, I told him. Say what you took. His breath hitched. His shoulders caved. He looked out at the audience, hundreds of faces staring at him, and then, finally, back at me. Your project, he whispered. The one that won the regional award. I submitted it as mine. A wave of shocked whispers rippled through the hall. Teachers gasped. Some students cursed under their breath. I felt something inside me twist. Not satisfaction, not triumph, something more painful and raw. And that scholarship, I said quietly. His eyes filled with tears. They wouldn't have given it to me if I'd told them the truth. My mother grabbed his arm. Enough, stop talking. But he shook her off, shaking his head. I thought if I won something big, Dad would finally... He glanced at our father, but the words died in his mouth. Finally what? I asked. Finally love you? My father's face darkened, but he said nothing. The audience was motionless, breathless, waiting for the next tremor. You knew, I said, turning to my parents, both of you. You knew he stole my work. You knew he lied. And instead of correcting it, you demanded that I hand him my graduation speech too, so he could stand on this stage and take the last thing that was supposed to be mine. My mother stepped forward, shaking. We didn't want to ruin his future. He was already accepted. They already announced his award. If the truth came out, my future was easier to ruin, right? I asked. Her silence was the answer. And suddenly, something inside me settled. Not peace, but clarity. I lifted the microphone again. Here's the truth, I said, my voice steady. I'm done being the shadow in my own family. And the hall erupted, not with applause, not with boos, but with a raw electric mixture of shock, outrage, sympathy, disbelief, and the sound of 100 whispered judgments colliding in the air. Behind me, my brother collapsed onto a chair, burying his face in his hands. My parents stood frozen, speechless, unable to control the narrative for the first time in their lives. And I stood alone at the podium, but for the first time, I didn't feel alone at all. The hall was still buzzing when the principal finally managed to step onto the stage. He whispered something to me, gentle, stunned, unsure, but I barely heard him. My pulse was still pounding with everything I'd kept silent for years. When I stepped away from the podium, the audience instinctively parted, creating a path, not out of respect, out of shock, out of uncertainty about what would explode next. My parents didn't follow me at first. They were too busy trying to gather themselves, trying to piece together the image they'd spent years crafting, which had shattered in under 5 minutes. My brother still sat on the chair, face buried, shaking. I walked past him. For the first time in my life, he didn't look at me for reassurance. He looked at me like he expected me to keep kicking him while he was down. But I didn't say anything. Maybe because I had nothing left to say. Maybe because some part of me still wanted to understand him, why he did it, why they let him. When I reached the side of the stage, my father finally called out, "Wait." The word sounded strangely small coming from him. When I turned, both my parents were walking toward me. My mother's face was streaked with tears she was clearly trying to hide, but failing. My father, always the impenetrable wall, looked shaken, as if the foundation under him had cracked too. "We never meant for this to happen," he said quietly, not meeting my eyes. "We were trying to protect the family." I laughed, but it wasn't a joke. "You protected an illusion, not a family." My mother stepped closer, her hands trembling. "You don't understand what it was like," she whispered. "Your brother, he always struggled. You were stronger. You never needed the same help." "You mean I never needed stealing?" I asked. She flinched. My father finally looked me in the eyes. "He couldn't handle failure," he said. "Every time he lost, he broke. You could survive anything. You always did. So you decided I could survive betrayal too?" I said. He didn't answer. That was answer enough. My brother rose unsteadily and approached us. His eyes were red, his guilt carved into every line of his face. "I'm sorry," he whispered. "I know that doesn't fix anything. I know I don't deserve forgiveness. I didn't think they would ever love me if I wasn't perfect." He swallowed hard. "And you were always better at everything." "That wasn't an excuse," I said softly. He nodded miserably. "I know. And it wasn't true," I added. "You assumed what they felt, but they were the ones who destroyed you with their expectations." My mother burst into tears. My father finally looked away. My brother's voice cracked as he spoke again. "I'll go to the scholarship board. I'll confess. I'll fix what I can." "That's not why I said anything today," I said. "Then why?" he whispered. And for the first time, I told the truth plainly. "Because you all took my voice for years, and today, I took it back." My brother broke into tears, not dramatic ones, quiet, exhausted, real, the kind that come only when a weight finally drops from someone's shoulders, even if it crushes them on the way down. My parents didn't argue anymore, didn't scold, didn't deny. The truth hung in the air too heavily for that. When I walked out of the auditorium into the bright afternoon sunlight, I didn't know what would come next for any of us. Scholarships might be revoked, reputations might crumble, my family might shatter entirely. But for the first time, the future felt like mine. And as I stepped off the last stair, I heard a small voice behind me, my brother's. "Can I walk with you?" I turned. His eyes were swollen but honest, fragile but trying. I hesitated, then nodded. Maybe forgiveness wouldn't come today, maybe not tomorrow, maybe not ever, but healing had to start somewhere, even with broken people, even with a broken family. And so we walked, two siblings, no longer one under the shadow of the other, into a future none of us had prepared for, but one that, for the first time, was finally real.